Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories, where we play tales to take you away from today. On the podcast today, we have some amazing stuff.
Amazing!
I take a minute to report on the December news. Cody from Wyoming tells us of his encounter with an elk. Sergeant Preston trails a werewolf, and Mary gets her wish with a holiday classic story. Add to that a moment in time, and of course, this 5-minute mystery.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by Ron's Amazing Stories. Now, I'm sorry about the quality on this one. We're getting towards the bottom end of the FMM stockpile. Not to worry, though, I did clean it up some. So, please enjoy.
In a small private lodge high on a mountaintop in the Lake Placid region, Alice Herrick toys nervously with a corsage of orchids pinned to her luxurious fur wrap, as her husband, his broad back against the cabin door, twirls a small revolver on his fingertips.
You're a fool, Charles. I don't know what you want of me. I'll do anything. Anything you say.
There's nothing I want of you now, Alice, but to have you dead.
It's money you want, isn't it, Charles? All right. You can have every cent I have.
Oh, no, Alice. This is it.
You haven't got the nerve. You haven't got the nerve to kill me. You'd never even...
You've underestimated me for the last time, Alice. And this time, it was fatal. I can't believe it.
Here, Mr. Herrick, you'd better sit down. Over here by the fire.
Thank you. I guess I'd better. Where was she, Sheriff, when you found her? Please, I want to know everything.
Well, she was sprawled in that chair over there by the desk. The gun had obviously fallen out of her hand onto the floor.
How long do you think she'd been dead, Sheriff?
The coroner said about 48 hours.
2 days. And all that time, Alice was lying here dead. I didn't even know.
Yes, the ironic part of it is we might not have even found her when we did. The skiers who reported it to me had passed your place earlier in the day and had seen your wife sitting there through the window and thought nothing of it. The gun was on the side away from the house. About dusk, they passed again, and when they saw she hadn't moved, they came up for a closer look.
They saw the gun then?
No, it wasn't until they noticed a wilted orchid on her dress and a few fallen petals beside her on the floor that they knew it was a woman and that she'd been dead for some time.
How ghastly.
The thing we've got to find out, Mr. Herrick, is why. Why should your wife decide to take her life?
I don't know. She often liked to come up here alone, and this time I thought it was no different.
You were never worried about your wife being up here alone?
Alice was a very independent woman, Sheriff. She wouldn't allow worrying over. Besides, we two were the only ones who had keys, and it was as safe as any place could be.
Then you'd say we could rule out the possibility of anyone's having gotten in and killed her.
Killed her? But Alice committed suicide. You said so yourself.
Well, we don't like to overlook anything.
But no one could have known she was up there. Besides, you said the place was locked when you found her. There was no robbery. What would be the motive?
Maybe that's the one thing you can tell us, Mr. Herrick. The motive, I mean.
I don't understand. What are you driving at?
Just this, Mr. Herrick. Your wife did not commit suicide. She was murdered, and you're under arrest for that same murder.
Why did the sheriff arrest Charles Herrick for murder? What was the clue? In a moment we'll hear, but first...
As I listen to this, I'm reminded of the fact that we were there when he killed his wife. It's not really a mystery when they do that. Also, in most of these cases, the reason for the murderer being caught is quite silly. So having said that, I'm going with... Heck, I have no idea. I really don't. So what do you say we just go find out?
And now, back to our story.
That was a nice, neat little job of stage setting you did, Mr. Herrick, to make your wife look like a suicide. Gun carelessly dropped under her lifeless hand, wilted petals fallen from her orchid corsage. But no one else could have gotten in because the door was locked, and the only other key with you. A perfect suicide, except for one thing. You shouldn't have been so exacting as to have strewn fallen petals from your wife's flowers, Mr. Herrick. Or didn't you know orchids do not shed their petals?
The orchid petals tipped him off, huh? Apparently, they don't fall off. Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Detective, but everything I read says they do fall off all at once, leaving a bare stalk behind. If only the killer knew that fact, he might have got away with it. This 5-Minute Mystery was brought to you by Ron's Amazing Stories. I say that we have some news and a story from Wyoming. Let's start with the news. Spotify. As I grow the podcast, we've hit some pretty amazing milestones. The first I remember was when Libsyn informed me that we had hit 500,000 unique downloads of the various podcasts. That was cool. Then came radio. We're in 12 cities now. Also cool. iHeartRadio is next, and now we will soon be available on the mobile version of Spotify. Now, this is something that I've tried and failed to get since the very beginning. I've done all the paperwork now, and I'm just waiting for the official start date, which should be in a couple days. So, if you're a Spotify user on your phone or tablet, be sure to favorite us and rate us. More on this later, but remember it will be a couple days before the show shows up. The blog. Do you read the blog? My numbers suggest that maybe 50 or so of you do. The blog is kind of an extension to the show, often with more information about what you're hearing or what is coming. It is weekly, and you can follow it on WordPress, Facebook, or have an email sent to you when it's updated. So, if you want to take a look, head to ronsamazingstories.blog. Check it out. Stories. I've had a shortage of stories of late, which is not unusual for the holiday season. However, I want your stories, and I'm willing to beg. So, here we go. Please send me stories. Please. There. That wasn't too bad, was it? You can send your stories, story ideas, or request for a callback at ronsamazingstories.com or .blog. Click on the Contact tab. It's your stories that make this Ron's Amazing Stories. I wonder if I should copyright that. Upcoming events. We have some cool stuff coming to the show. Jason and I are preparing for the Horror Express number 20. This show will cover UFOs, and Jason is going to talk about the recent find in Peru that has everyone rethinking the alien part of ufology. My brother Jim is preparing to tell us all about his strange visit to an ancient Scottish castle, and I am working on some interviews with some brand new upcoming authors. It just keeps getting better. Listener's story. We have an unusual story from Cody Appadale. Cody is one of our most active Facebook listeners and helps promote the show there. Thank you for that, Cody. He writes us from Facebook. I said I would share some stories, so let's see what comes of it. I'll be sending my stories in parts since I generally don't have time to type them all in one go. I call this one Dent in the Hood. Last summer, I worked in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. It's a few hours away from where my parents live. One weekend, I decided to drive home to visit. Work ended about 10 p.m. I jumped into my little two-door Honda Civic and went on my way. The route I took is really only known to locals, and it cuts off about a half an hour of travel time. However, this road is void of any civilization for the most part. There's even a sign that warns drivers that there isn't a gas station for 50 miles. By the time I hit the lonesome stretch, it was just after midnight. This route has lots of national forest and winding canyon roads. Being a confident young man, I was driving fast and whipping around the curves of the canyons. Coming around a wide curve, the brights of my light caught sight of a large elk cow. Now, sometimes we have to question the intelligence of wildlife. If the elk had just run straight across the road, we both would have been scared, but fine. Nope. This elk fled to the center line and began running directly away from the car. I locked up my brakes. I would guess I was cruising around 70 miles an hour when I spied my soon-to-be passenger, and about 30 by the time we actually met. The elk was on the far right side of the road, and my car, being low and small, went right under its back legs, and she had a seat. She eventually bounced off the hood into the darkness. The shock and amazement of the impact left me coasting my car for roughly 1/4 of a mile before pulling off to the side. I got out and did a quick inspection of my car. And yes, there was a nice big imprint on the hood. But I did make it home safely, and I continued to use that car for another half a year. I'm sorry to say I don't know whatever happened to the elk, though. Probably never will. Cody of Wyoming. By the way, it's fun to tell people that I had an elk sit on my car. Well, Cody, that is a fun story. And if my knowledge of elk cows is correct, you probably gave her a scare, and she now is telling her youngins about the time she got a ride on a Honda Civic. Thank you, Cody. Our OTR story features a werewolf, a Yukon husky, and a mounted policeman. Do you have any idea what series it might be? If you guessed Challenge of the Yukon, you would be right. The series was about Sergeant William Preston of the Northwest Mounted Police and his sled dog, Yukon King. The two fought evildoers in the northern wilderness during the gold rush of the 1890s. Challenge of the Yukon began as a 15-minute serial in 1947. The program went to the standard half-hour format when sponsor Quaker Oats moved it to ABC. It ran there until 1949. It was then picked up by the Mutual Broadcasting System and continued on to 1955. The title changed to Sergeant Preston of the Yukon. Our story comes from its ABC run and is titled The Trail of the Werewolf. It first aired on April 14th, 1949.
Now, as gunshots echo across the wind-swept, snow-covered reaches of the wild Northwest, Quaker Puffed Wheat and Quaker Puffed Rice, the breakfast cereal shot from guns, present the Challenge of the Yukon. It's Yukon King, swiftest and strongest lead dog of the Northwest, blazing the trail for Sergeant Preston of the Northwest Mounted Police in his relentless pursuit of lawbreakers.
On King! On, you huskies!
Gold discovered in the Yukon. A stampede to the Klondike in the wild race for riches. Back to the days of the gold rush. With Quaker Puffed Wheat and Quaker Puffed Rice, bringing you the adventures of Sergeant Preston and his wonder dog Yukon King as they meet the Challenge of the Yukon. Say, are you game for a dare?
Who, me? Sure I am. What's up?
Well, then, tomorrow morning, try a breakfast of Quaker Puffed Rice or Quaker Puffed Wheat topped with milk or cream and fruit. Boy, I just dare you to say it doesn't hit the spot. These ready-to-serve king-size kernels of premium wheat or rice are shot from guns. Yes, Quaker Puffed Rice and Quaker Puffed Wheat are actually exploded up to 8 times normal size. That's why they're so crisp, tender, delicious. Tomorrow, just you try this breakfast treat. Quaker puffed rice or Quaker puffed wheat. The girl watched the big black-bearded man put on his parka. She stood with her back to the door, her fists clenched, her lips trembling.
Stand aside, Nancy. I'm leaving.
Please, Uncle John. Please let me go with you.
No. If I'm to carry a full load of supplies, I can't carry a passenger.
I'll be all alone.
There's nothing can hurt you if you keep the door barred.
At least wait until morning. Please wait until morning before you go.
If I do that, then I won't be back by tomorrow night. You're being ridiculous.
I can't help it. I'm afraid. If I see it again, I don't know what I'll do.
Nancy, I thought we'd agreed that you'd see nothing.
Maybe an hallucination, as you say, but it's real to me.
You persist in this evil imagining?
All I know is that if I'm with you, I won't see it. I'm sure of that.
Are you trying to make me believe that you're losing your mind?
I don't know. Maybe I am. Those strange, gleaming eyes. Those jaws. That ghostly body and cry. Mournful howl like a lost soul.
Stop it. I have no sympathy with your hysteria.
If it isn't real, don't you understand? That makes it even worse.
I only understand that when you were a child, that Indian nurse filled your brain with stories about werewolves. And now, since your father is dead and you don't wish to remain with me here in the canyon,
It isn't that
let
at
me
all.
finish. You want me to stay here and work the mine so you can live in ease in San Francisco or New York.
No, Uncle John.
So you've invented this stupid, childish story of a white wolf pursuing
I
you.
swear I saw it. It was coming after me.
I made you take me back to where you saw it. You remember that? There were no tracks except those made by your dog team.
All right. I'll admit again that I was wrong. Only don't leave me alone here.
You must conquer this weakness.
I can't.
You must. I'll tell you this, Nancy, that if you don't, I'll take you away from here.
You will.
And I'll have you locked up in an institution for the insane.
But I'm not.
You're trying to make me believe you are?
Haven't you any sympathy, any pity?
No. Nothing but profound disgust.
And my father was your brother.
Are you accusing me of forgetting that?
Only that
After coming here, after working the mine for
I
you?
didn't mean
What
that.
do you mean?
Nothing. Nothing.
Are you going to behave?
I'll try.
Then stand aside. I'm leaving.
Oh, Uncle John.
Good night.
A moment later, the girl heard the team start away from the cabin. With a great effort, she controlled her sobbing. She turned the lamp low and then went to bed. But it was impossible for her to sleep. She lay staring at the ceiling, waiting. An hour passed. 2 hours. And then a strange, unearthly howl drifted down from the top of the canyon.
Only a wolf. An ordinary wolf. I won't look. I won't. If I see it again. Oh, Father. Father.
The howl was heard again, closer this time. The girl sat upright. And then mechanically, as if some force outside herself were driving her on, she rose from her bed and started for the window. She closed her eyes for a second when she reached it. And then she opened them and stared out into the night. A white animal was racing down the trail from the mine toward the cabin door. Closer and closer. The girl could see the flash of green eyes. The animal hurled itself at the door of the cabin, and the girl dropped to the floor unconscious. A distant whistle. The animal howled again and raced back up the trail. The night was quiet once more. It was nearly an hour later. A team swung into the opening of the canyon from the creek trail. The great dog King was working his loose lead, and Sergeant Preston rode the sled.
On, King! On, you husky!
The team raced toward the cabin, and there the sergeant called on them to stop.
Well, King! Hi, huskies! Hold on! Well, King, this must be the place. What's the matter, boy? Well, don't worry, I have my gun ready. There was a lamp lit. Must be someone inside. I'll take a look through the window. A girl, King, lying on the floor. Door's probably barred. I'll try to force this window. Good. One boy. Seems to have fainted. I got her back in bed. There. A little brandy will help if I can get her to drink it.
No.
Here, try to drink this. I'll hold you up. That's it.
Stop him!
What's the matter?
The wolf, he's trying to break down the door.
There's no wolf around here.
What?
Look, I'm Sergeant Preston, Northwest Mounted Police. I just drove up. Saw you lying on the floor, so I came through the window.
Wasn't there? I didn't really see it.
You may have seen a wolf before I got here. You must have fainted.
No, I didn't actually see it. There's no wolf like that. It's the werewolf the Indians used to talk about, and I'm dreaming it. I'm going crazy, just like Uncle John said.
Here, now, wait a minute. There's nothing crazy about you, young lady.
There's no such thing. It doesn't exist. White, those awful green
Take
eyes.
it easy. I've seen wolves that seem to be white in the moonlight.
But you don't find any tracks from this one. I thought I saw him jump against the door.
You're Nancy Harrow, aren't you?
What? How do you know me?
I used to know your father.
He's dead.
I heard that he died. I'm very sorry.
Now there's only Uncle John. I think he hates me.
Your Uncle John is here?
He's gone to the post for supplies. He left me alone.
Nancy, I'm going to have to ask you quite a few questions, but before I do that, I'm going to make you a good strong cup of tea. Will you drink it for me?
If you want me to, let me make it.
All right. That's a good idea.
As the girl made tea, the sergeant and King went outside the cabin and investigated the trail that ran up the canyon to the mine. When they entered the cabin again, the tea was waiting on the table, and the girl had already started to drink her cup.
You didn't find the tracks, did you?
There are a lot of tracks, Nancy. I'll admit that King didn't act as if there'd been a wolf around, but you might have seen a dog. White dog.
No. But please, I don't want to talk about it.
All right, we won't. This is fine tea.
Does taste good.
You feeling better?
Yes.
Ready to talk a little?
As long as it isn't about that.
It's about your father and your Uncle John.
Why did Dad have to die?
Were you left all alone here then?
Not for long. Dad had already written to Uncle John. He was on his way when it happened.
When did he arrive?
About 2 months ago.
He's working the mine himself?
Yes, all by himself. He fired the men that Dad had working for him.
I see. Nancy, had you ever met your uncle before he came here?
No.
Ever seen his picture?
Oh, yes.
Really?
I have one right here in the table drawer. It's a tintype of Dad and Uncle John when they were about my age. Here.
Thank you. And you were able to recognize your uncle when he arrived from this picture?
Well, he's changed. He's so much older, and he has a beard. He seemed to look more like Dad in this picture.
I see. You said he didn't like you.
He doesn't think I appreciate what he's doing for me. Working the mine and everything. And lately, since I saw that thing, well, he says I'm going crazy.
You own the mine, don't you, Nancy?
I suppose so.
Do you have any other relatives besides your Uncle John?
No.
Well, I'm going to have to tell you something. It'll be a surprise and a shock. But you must remember that your father had friends, Nancy. And his friends are your friends. I'm one of them.
I'm glad.
My dear, your Uncle John is dead.
What? Tonight? Something happened to him tonight after he left here?
No, not tonight. He died over 2 months ago.
But that's impossible. I mean, oh, I am going crazy.
Nothing of the sort. Your uncle was shot, and I have reason to believe that the man who's been pretending he's your uncle is the man who shot him.
Pretending?
Yes, Nancy. There's no need for you to know all the details. It isn't a pleasant story. But I'm going to take you with me down to Dawson, where you can live with some people who'll be kind to you.
Will you, Sergeant?
You can start getting your things together, and I don't like to leave you alone.
Oh, please don't.
But I'll have to for a little while, Nancy. There's work I must do tonight. What's the matter, King?
It's the werewolf again.
I don't think so. Not a man who's taken the form of a wolf, but a wolf in the form of a man. Get down, Nancy, on the floor, under the table.
All right, Sergeant.
We'll continue our story in just a moment. You know, fellas and girls, I was out walking one night, It was a beautiful night, full moon and everything. And, well, sir, maybe you won't believe it, but here's what happened.
Hello down there.
For a moment, I didn't realize who was talking to me.
Hello.
Then I saw him. Say, aren't you...
Yes, I am the man in the moon.
Gee, I've often seen you, but this is the first time I've ever had the pleasure of talking to you.
I don't talk to everyone.
But why favor me, Mr. Man in the Moon?
I want to compliment you.
About what?
About giving all the boys and girls such good advice.
You mean telling them to eat a good breakfast? And that nothing tastes sweller than delicious Quaker puffed wheat and Quaker puffed rice with milk or cream and fruit?
Precisely.
Well, I don't want to brag, but I must admit that wheat or rice shot from guns are exploded up to 8 times normal size to make them bigger and better tasting. They're shot through and through with keen nut-like flavor. They're crisp, they're tender. What's more, I think it's important to tell all the fellows and girls that Quaker puffed wheat and Quaker puffed rice are good for them. They furnish added food values of restored natural grain amounts of vitamin B1, niacin, and iron.
Good advice, that.
But say, Mr. Man in the Moon, how do you know so much about wheat or rice shot from guns? We don't sell Quaker puffed wheat and Quaker puffed rice up there on the moon.
I am old and wise. The man in the moon knows many, many things. Well, that's all for now. Goodbye.
Well, sir, fellas and girls, what do you know about that? One thing, though, and this is for sure. Unlike the man in the moon, you can always enjoy nourishing, tasty breakfasts of Quaker puffed wheat or Quaker puffed rice morning after morning. Grocers everywhere down here have crisp, fresh wheat or rice shot from guns. But mind you, it's never sold in bags or bulk. Always look for the famous big red and blue package with the smiling Quaker man on the front. That way you're sure to get the original, the one and only Quaker puffed wheat and Quaker puffed rice. Now to continue our story. Sergeant Preston pulled Nancy to the floor. Just a rifle bullet crashed through the window and smashed the lamp on the table. In the darkness, the sergeant and the girl listened, but there was no other sound from outside. Then...
Matt must have changed his mind about going to the post. Matt Bennett, the man you've been calling Uncle John. Tell me, Nancy, you seen any other men around here?
No.
Where'd the men who used to work here live?
There's some cabins beyond the mine near the top of the canyon.
Huh? How far?
Oh, that's about half a mile. The mine's about halfway between here and there.
What's the mine like? Describe it to me.
There's nothing unusual about it. It's an old mine. The main shaft goes right through the hill.
2 entrances. It'll be possible to get into it without being seen from here.
The other side.
I understand. How many tunnels leading off from the main one?
4, but 3 of them are boarded up. Where are you going? You're not going outside.
No, only to the window.
Can you see anyone?
Come here, Nancy.
What is it?
Keep down low. Now look in the direction I'm pointing.
All right.
Can you see a man in the shadow of that rock?
Yes. At least I can see something.
You can make out the parka he's wearing.
Yes, it isn't Uncle. It isn't Matt Bennett. Sergeant, he's standing up. He's coming this way.
I know.
He has a rifle.
Yes, I know. Keep down.
He'll shoot again.
I'm not giving him any target. Get back under the table again.
All right, Sergeant. What's he doing?
Still walking toward the cabin. I have him covered.
That's far enough. Drop your rifle.
Not me.
Now will you drop it?
Yeah. Now don't shoot again. You caught me in the arm.
Come on. Walk straight to the door.
All right.
Nancy, I have to keep him covered. Run to the door and unbar it and get back out of the way.
I will.
Is there another lamp around?
Yes,
Light it, will you?
of course.
All right, you. Step inside.
Might as well shoot and get it over with.
Where do you want the lamp?
On the table, please.
Hey, you're not Matt. You're Sergeant Preston.
That's right, Bledsoe. So it was Matt who wanted to kill.
He had it coming to him.
Close the door, Nancy, and bar it again.
Yes, Sergeant.
Sit down, Dan. I'll take a look at your arm.
Drilled it clean.
Help you off with your parka.
Ow.
Some antiseptic and some clean cloth, Nancy.
I'll get some.
You're under arrest, of course, Dan. Now we're adding attempted murder to bank robbery.
I didn't get a penny out of that job. Matt got it all.
How'd you manage to trace him here?
How did you?
A man named John Harrell was found at the bottom of a ravine, murdered.
I didn't have anything to do with that.
But you found out about it.
Sure.
Here, you are, Sergeant.
Oh, thank you, Nancy.
Dolly told me what Matt was up to.
Huh?
Coming up here to take over this mine. Pretending he was the dead man. Moving in with his gang, hiding out and working the mine at the same time.
Easy.
Where is he, though? Where's he gone? Where are the rest of them?
Well, that's what I'm going to find out as soon as I finished with you.
Could they be in the mine, Sergeant?
It's possible, Nancy. Dan, there's one of them called Roof. Didn't he own a wolf dog with a white coat?
That's right. A killer. Roof's the only one who could handle him.
He's been seen around here.
The werewolf? The animal I saw?
Yes, Nancy.
I didn't imagine it after all.
No. There you are, Dan.
Thanks.
Don't thank me. I'm going to tie up your feet and handcuff your good hand to this chair. Is there any rope around, Nancy?
Yes, on the shelf.
Oh, yes, I see it. When did Matt plan to get back here?
Tomorrow night.
We'll investigate the mine right away. Put your feet together, Dan. That's it. Closer now. All right. Now the handcuffs. There. Nancy, I'm going out and get Dan's rifle. You know how to use it, don't you?
I can't shoot very straight.
You won't have to. After I've gone, I want you to put out the lamp and stand guard by the window.
Yes?
There's a moon, and you can see down the canyon to the creek trail. Now, if you see anyone at all, I want you to fire 3 times in the air. I'll get back here just as fast as I can.
You're going up to the mine?
First, I'll get the rifle. Come on, King.
The sergeant gave Nancy the rifle and left her on guard at the window. A few minutes later, he and King reached the entrance to the mine.
One boy, inside.
The sergeant was carrying a hurricane lantern, its faint light hardly touching the walls and ceiling of the main tunnel.
Think this is a strange place for men to be living, King? Well, if they were using the cabins at the top of the canyon, Nancy would have seen them. This is about the only other place they could live. What's that growl mean? That there is someone in here? All right, boy, you lead the way.
King headed straight through the tunnel, past one boarded-up shaft, then another, and a third that was evidently being worked. He reached a 4th tunnel leading off the main one, and here he stopped and looked up at his master. The shaft had been boarded up as well, and now the boards had been torn away and left in a pile beside the opening.
This it, King? Go on, boy.
As they started down the tunnel, they heard the wolf dog howling ahead of them.
I'd better put out this lantern, King.
Now, in total darkness, they crept forward. The wolf dog howled again. A man shouted at him to be quiet, and the howling faded into a growl and died away. The sergeant and King kept on until something barred their way.
Feels like a wall, King. Wait, it's giving. There's a door in it.
As the sergeant slowly opened the door, he could see a faint glow, the light from an oil stove. The tunnel widened beyond the door, and along one wall were 3 bunks. There was a table against the other wall, and it was to this the wolf dog was tied. The sergeant leveled his gun at the 3 blanket-covered figures in the bunks.
You're under arrest in the name of the Queen.
But at that moment, with a terrific effort, the wolf dog broke his leash and leaped at the sergeant. King met the dog's attack, but in the next second, the men had rolled from their bunks, and the fighting dogs in the narrow entrance, leaping and snarling, gave them cover from the sergeant's guns. The man opened fire. The sergeant himself, afraid of hitting King, dropped to the ground outside the open door. King was calling on all his superb strength to meet the wolf dog's furious onslaught.
Who's out there, Roof?
The Mounties trying to arrest us.
Get him! I can't get a shot. The dogs are in the way.
Forget the dog. Shoot for the doorway.
In a moment of crisis, a man acts by instinct. Suddenly, as the wolf dog leaped high in the air to escape King's jaws, a shot caught him. He dropped to the floor, and King was standing alone facing the outlaws. The sergeant leaped to his feet.
All right, here I am. Let's see if you can hit me.
As soon as the sergeant offered himself as a target to draw the fire from King, he threw himself against the wall and dropped to the ground again. Luck was with him. A projecting rock gave him some cover, and he pulled King down beside him. In the instant he had stood erect, he had placed one of his opponents in a far corner. Now he fired.
Oh! He got me, Roof. Go get him!
Bullets chipped the rock in front of the sergeant. He held his own fire until he was certain of the second outlaw's position, and then... There was a lull filled only with the groaning of the second man who had been hit. If the rock in front of the sergeant gave him protection, it also prevented him from getting a shot at the third outlaw.
Oh, help me! Come back!
Then he heard him making a break for the other side of the rocky room. 2 guns flashed in the dark. The outlaw's bullet cut through the shoulder of the Mounties' parka, but the sergeant's caught a man in the leg and he crashed to the floor.
You had enough?
Yeah.
Then don't make a move.
How can I? My leg.
The sergeant lit his lantern and advanced into the room. It was Ruth who had been hit in the leg. Potter was clutching a shattered wrist, but it was only Ben who had been hurt seriously. The sergeant gave him first aid after collecting all the guns.
Am I going to die?
No, you're going to jail.
Why? What's the charge against us?
You don't have to be told. The charge is murder.
We didn't have anything to do with that.
Still, you know what I'm talking about.
We didn't kill John Harrow.
I warn you, anything you say may be used against you.
You can't use the truth against us. We didn't do it.
We tried to stop Matt.
I swear, Sergeant. Sure, we meant to rob Harrow, but that's all.
We'll see what a judge and jury believes. What's the matter, King?
King had suddenly leaped to his feet and started for the door. Then he ran back to his master.
Did you hear something I didn't, boy?
Once more, the dog ran to the door.
Listen, did any of you 3 hear some shots tonight?
We heard plenty.
I mean from outside.
You can't hear anything from outside in here.
But you heard something just now, didn't you, King? All right, boy. Hold out your good hand, Potter.
What are you going to do?
I'm handcuffing you to Ruth so you'll be here when I get back.
You're leaving. Aren't you going to do anything for my leg?
That can wait until I get back.
You will come back, you promise. We'll tell the truth about Matt.
I'll be back. You can depend on it. Let's go, King.
Matt Bennett was just stopping his team in front of the cabin.
Oh there. Whoop. Oh. Nancy, what are you doing with that rifle? Why did you fire those shots?
I didn't know who you were.
Who does this other team belong to? Who's in there with you?
Why have you come back?
Because I took the ridge trail to the crossroads. Trapper who lives there said 2 men drove up the creek in this direction. Have you seen anything of them? Where'd this team come from?
There's a man inside here with me. I shot him. I took him prisoner.
What? Unbar the door and let me in.
No, I won't. I'll shoot you.
Drop that rifle, you little fool. Drop it and open the door or I'll shoot
No,
you.
please.
Do as I say.
All right.
Where is he?
In the chair by the table.
Light the lamp. Now we'll see who... Dan Bledsoe.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a long time.
Yeah, it has.
You let this kid take you prisoner and tie you up?
What does it look like?
I don't believe it. What are you trying to hide there with your left hand?
Nothing.
Handcuffs. There were 2 men, the trapper said. One of them was a Mountie. He's the one who tied you up this way. Nancy, where is he?
I don't know.
Dan, what'd you tell him?
Nothing he didn't know already.
What?
Nothing Dolly didn't tell me.
Dolly? That... Nancy, where's that Mountie?
Let go of my wrist.
I'll break it if I have to. Where is he?
You'll find out soon enough. You're not my uncle. You're a crook and a killer.
Yeah, he's gone to the mine. That's it. Well, if Ruth doesn't take care of him, I'll be waiting for him when he comes out. Huh. But first, I'm going to take care of you 2, just so there won't be any loose ends lying around this time. Nancy, you don't feel like saying uncle, you're not going to say anything at all.
You call me crazy. You're the one who's crazy.
I'll show you.
No, don't shoot.
All right, then. Up with your hands. You're covered.
Who?
Sergeant Preston at the window.
We'll see who's covered. No!
Put his gun, Nancy.
I have it.
No, my arm. No.
Matt Bennett, you're under arrest in the name of the Queen for the murder of John Harrow. And just as sure as there's justice in the Yukon, you'll hang for your crimes.
Oh, Sergeant.
It's all right, Nancy. You don't have anything at all to be afraid of anymore.
I fired 3 times. I thought you didn't hear the shot.
I didn't hear the shots, but King did. That's why we're here. That's why the case is closed.
In just a moment, Sergeant Preston will give you a preview of Friday's adventure. Remember, here's the breakfast that wins the praise of so many He-Man Hollywood movie stars.
It's nutritious, delicious Quaker puffed wheat or Quaker puffed rice.
You, too, will go for wheat or rice shot from guns. You'll want to try them starting tomorrow. Say, fellas, do you go for basketball, baseball? You like to attend gym? Want to learn to swim? Boy, I bet every one of you does. And I'm sure many of you fellows are interested in music, dramatic clubs, and learning real trades like carpentry. Well, that's what boys' clubs offer boys age 8 to 20. Ask your parents if your town has a boys' club. Remember, the boys' club is your club. All boys are welcome. The clubs are sponsored by non-sectarian, non-profit organizations of public-spirited adults who operate the clubs for the benefit of the boy members. So here's a big hand to the Boys' Clubs of America and the wonderful work they're doing in building the citizens of tomorrow. These radio dramas, a feature of the Challenge of the Yukon Incorporated, are created and produced by George W. Trendle, directed by Fred Flowerday, and edited by Fran Stryker. The part of Sergeant Preston is played by Paul Sutton. They are brought to you Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at this same time by Quaker Puffed Wheat and Quaker Puffed Rice, the breakfast cereal shot from guns. Listen Friday when Sergeant Preston and Yukon King meet the challenge of the Yukon in the case Trouble at 40 Mile.
When the inspector at Dawson City asked me to take King and go to 40 Mile because of trouble there, we had no idea of the mysterious happenings that had been going on. We ran into plenty of trouble, and the mystery of the locked cabin almost had me stumped and almost cost the constable his life. Believe me, I was thankful King was with me on that case.
Be sure to hear this exciting adventure Friday. Boys and girls, can you guess what your dog likes best? That's right, meat. That's why over 1 million cans of kennel ration are sold every week. Because kennel ration is made with lean red meat, choice cuts of U.S. government-inspected horse meat. Have Mom open a can. She'll like the appetizing aroma, and you will actually see the chunks of meat. And kennel ration has all the vitamins and minerals that help keep dogs in top health. Have Mom get kennel ration today. Kennel ration, first in canned dog food. This is J. Michael wishing goodbye, good luck, and good health from Quaker Puffed Wheat and Quaker Puffed Rice. So long. This is ABC, the American Broadcasting Company.
Now, I thought that one was one of the better shows from that series. The style for the show was modeled after the Lone Ranger, which really should come as no surprise since it was created at the same radio station he was. Following the success of the Lone Ranger and the Green Hornet, George W. Trendle, the station owner, asked for a similar adventure show but with a dog. Trendle insisted that it not be Lassie-like because this must be an action story. It had to be a working dog. Well, Mr. Trendle, you did a good thing. How about that? The date is May 15th, 1953, and this is A Moment in Time. When I found this one, I couldn't help but bring it to you. It shows the hard-hitting headlines of the day that just don't get into today's journalistic broadcasts. Or maybe they do. Let's listen into this headline edition.
Headline edition, Taylor Grant speaking, May 15th, 1953.
The American Broadcasting Company presents Headline Edition with Taylor Grant.
In Washington, General Bradley's speech today was one of several interesting news developments dealing with our military defenses. Here's a summary by Gunner Back. We seem to be unable to contact Washington at this time. Let's try once again. Our cue to Washington is here is a summary by Gunner Back. sorry we seem to be unable, for some inexplicable reason, to contact correspondent Gunner back in Washington, even as we have contacted him every night for the past 8 years. Well, the speech by General Bradley, as you may have heard, was before the Women's National Press Club, and it was one in which he told the assembled ladies that the United States must spend heavily on military readiness as far into the future as we can see at this time. Now then, to the nation's sports fans, the biggest news in quite a while is building tonight in Chicago, where world heavyweight champion Rocky Marciano is about to meet that challenge from ex-champ Jersey Joe Walcott. We sent correspondent Tom Casey to the weighing-in ceremonies today, and he recorded this report at that dramatic scene. Well, Mother told me there would be days like this. Shall we try once again for Chicago? Calling Tom Casey in Chicago. Our cue is this report at that dramatic scene. Some nights you can't make $1,000. Unfortunately, we had been told earlier today that Tom Casey had recorded a very fascinating report at the weighing-in ceremonies in which he had the voices of both Joe Walcott and Rocky Marciano. Don't know how the betting is going right at the moment. Don't know as we should report it if we did know. Matter of fact, having a piece of coffee about the fight tonight, except that we know it's going to be a very interesting one, an exciting one, just as it was the last time they met. The weigh-in ceremonies took place at the Chicago Stadium, and that's where correspondent Casey had prepared for us that excellent report, which you and I have been unable to hear at this time. Let's see what else we have in the news to talk about this evening on a memorable headline edition, at least to me. Suppose we come back to you in just a moment or two. On this cue, I'll be back in a minute with more news.
Headline Edition is one of over 60 top ABC news shows brought to you each week by a distinguished staff of reporters, analysts, and commentators. ABC specializes in swift, accurate, and complete reporting of the latest happenings here and abroad. That kind of news coverage doesn't just happen. A trained newsman fills in the coloring that... A trained newsman fills in the coloring that brings the event to life, but it takes an experienced correspondent to know how that event fits the overall news pattern. For penetrating analyses, stay tuned throughout the day and night to ABC. Now, here again is Taylor Grant and Headline Edition.
With portions transcribed. What portions? That's today's Headline Edition.
I'm still cracking up over this outtake. That really wasn't an outtake at all. This was the report from May 15th of 1953, and it is real. I loved it when the guy starts to read the ABC News doctrine. You just can't make this stuff up. I hope that you enjoyed it as well. The things I find researching for the show, I absolutely love it. This has been A Moment in Time.
As read by. Amazing stories read by amazing people.
This time on As Read By, we have a short story request sent in by listener Mari Langstrom. Mari writes, I would love to hear one of my favorite stories by Hans Christian Andersen. Please, can you play The Little Match Girl? Well, Mari, your wish is granted. Here is that famous tale as read by Ted Henley.
It was the last evening of the year. In the cold and darkness, a poor little girl, with bare head and feet, was wandering about the streets. Her feet were quite red and blue with the cold. In her tattered apron she carried a bundle of matches, and there were a good many more in her hand. No one had bought any of them the livelong day. No one had given her a single penny. Trembling with cold and hunger, she crept on, the picture of sorrow. The snowflakes settled on her long, fair hair, which fell in ringlets over her shoulders, but she thought neither of her own beauty nor of the cold. Lights shone from every window, and the smell of roast goose reached her, for it was New Year's Eve, and it was of that she thought. In a corner formed by two houses, one of which came a little farther forward than the other, she sat down, drawing her feet close under her, but in vain. She could not warm them. She dared not go home. She had sold no matches, earned not a single penny, and her father would certainly beat her. Besides, her home was almost as cold as the street. It was an attic, and although the larger of many holes in the roof were stopped up with straw and rags, the cold wind came whistling through. Her hands were nearly frozen. A match would warm them, perhaps, if she dared to light it. She drew one out and struck it against the wall. It was a bright, warm light, like a little candle, and she held her hands over it. It was quite a wonderful light. It seemed to that poor little girl as though she were sitting before a large iron stove with polished brass feet and brass ornaments. So beautifully did the fire within burn that the child stretched out her feet to warm them also. Alas, in the instant the flame had died away, and the stove vanished, and the little girl sat cold and comfortless, with the remains of the burnt match in her hand. A second match was struck. It kindled and blazed, and wherever its light fell, the wall became transparent as a veil, and the little girl could see into the room. She saw a table spread with a snowy white tablecloth, and set with shining china dinner dishes. A roast goose, stuffed with apples and dried plums, stood at one end, smoking hot, and pleasantest of all to see, the goose, with knife and fork still in her breast, jumped down from the dish, and waddled along the floor, right up to the poor child. The match was burnt out, and only the thick, hard wall was beside her. She lighted a third match. Again the flame shot up, and now she was sitting under a most beautiful Christmas tree, far larger and far more prettily decked out than the last one she had seen last Christmas Eve through the glass doors of the rich merchant's house. Thousands of wax tapers lighted up the branches, and tiny painted figures, such as she had seen in the shop windows, looked down from the tree upon her. The child stretched out her hands toward them, and the match went out. Still, however, the Christmas candles burned higher and higher, till they looked to her like the stars in the sky. One of them fell, the light streaming behind it like a long, fiery tail. "Now someone is dying," said the little girl softly, for she had been told by her old grandmother, the only person who had been kind to her, but she was now dead, that whenever a star falls, a soul flies up to God. She struck another match against the wall, and the light shone around her, and in its brightness she saw her dear dead grandmother, gentle and loving as always, but bright and happy as she had never looked during her lifetime. "Grandmother," said the child, "oh, take me with you. I know you will leave me as soon as the match goes out. You'll vanish, like the warm stove, like the New Year's feast, and like the beautiful Christmas tree." And she hastily lighted all the remaining matches in the bundle, lest her grandmother should disappear. And the matches burned with such a splendor that noonday could scarcely have been brighter. Never had the good old grandmother looked so tall and stately, so beautiful and kind. She took the little girl into her arms, and they both flew away together, radiant with happiness. They flew far above the earth, higher and higher, till they were in that place where neither cold, nor hunger, nor pain is ever known in the presence of God. End of The Little Match Girl by Hans Christian Andersen.
And that one comes from the friendly folks at LibriVox.org. If you haven't checked them out, you should. That is the podcast for this week. Next up, my very own brother will join us on the podcast to tell us a strange story about one of Scotland's most remarkable buildings, the Roslin Chapel. You won't want to miss this amazing story. If you want to keep up with what's happening on Ron's Amazing Stories, please follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or sign up for the weekly newsletter. All of the links you're going to need and access to the blog can be found at ronsamazingstories.com. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.
All of the vintage audio used in the podcast is believed to be in the public domain. Ron's Amazing Stories does not own the rights to any of the old-time radio used here. If you hold the rights to any of the shows played, please contact us immediately at ronsamazingstories.com.